Yesterday, right, what we did in the beginning of class was we're taking a quadratic and we're putting it into intercept form or factored form, right? And we do that by looking at this last number and thinking about the numbers that multiply together to get to 12. What numbers multiply together to get to 12? 3 times 4, 1 times 12, 2 times 6. Which ones could I use to get to 7? 3 and 4. Right? And it's a positive 3 and a positive 4, right? Because positive times a positive will give me this positive, positive plus a positive will give me this positive. That means that my factors will be x plus 3, x plus 4, right? X plus 3, x plus 4. What do I do when I have something like b, where I have the factored form version and I want to go to general form? Yeah, distribute, or we sometimes call it the FOIL method, right? So I'm going to take that first number, 2x, and I'm going to multiply it by the other first number, by 3x. What's 2x times 3x? Good, 6x squared. And then I do my outer times my outer. So 2x times 4, 8x. Inner times inner is -1 times 3x. Good. And then last one, I do my last, -1 times 4, -4. And then I combine these two together, so I get 6x squared. And then 8x minus 3x is 5x. And then minus 4. Right? So my first number, that a, right, this is a x squared plus bx plus c. Okay. So my a comes from my first times first. My b comes from my outers and my inners. And my c comes from the last times the last. So now let's think part C. They gave me one of my factors and most of my quadratic. But what do so let's think about, right? I got to fill in this spot and this spot. So my first times first, 2x times something has to give me 2x squared. 2x times what gives me 2x squared? X. Okay. And 3 times something has to give me 12. 3 times what gives us 12? 4. Okay. And then let's check our inners and outers. Right? My inners be 3x. My outers are 8x. So what's 3x plus 8x? 3x plus 8x. 11x. 11. Same sort of thing here. So I think to myself, first times first has to give me 3x squared. So x times what would give me 3x squared? 3x. And my last times last has to equal -12. 6 times what gives me -12? -2. And then I want to check for my inners and outers. So my inners are 6 times 3x, which is, what's 6 times 3? 18x. And my outers are -2 times x. So 18x minus 2x, 16x. Okay. So you're starting to see kind of the pattern there. Again, my first times first gives me that first term. My outers and my inners give me my middle term, and my last times last gives me the last term. Okay, so I want to look at part E. Part E, and I'm going to show you a little, this is kind of how I teach it, okay? Because yesterday, all we had to do was look at that last number, right? And think to ourselves, what are the numbers that multiply together to get to 5? What numbers multiply together to get to 5? 1 and 5. Can I use 1 and 5 to get to 8? No. So now that I have this number out in front, I have to use those factors as well. So what numbers multiply together to get to 3? Just 1 and 3, okay? So then let me show you this. So I want you to draw a little cross, a little, 4 corners sort of thing. And the 2 top squares, those are going to be our first times first. And the 2 bottom squares are the last and last, right? First and first, last and last. And then these 2 on the side are also going to be our outers. Our outers. And these 2 on this side are going to be our inners. Okay. So I know that my first and first have to be like 3 and 1, right? 3 times 1 is the only way I can get to 3. So I'm going to put 3 and 1 up here. 3 and 1. I know that my first and first have to be 3 and 1, or 3, right? It should be 3x and 1x, right? Now my last and last are going to be 1 and 5, but I don't know if it should be 1 and 5 or if it should be 5 and 1. And that's why I kind of organize it this way to just kind of like talk through the thinking. So let's think about this. So I know 3 times 1 is going to give me 3, so I'm good for my first times first. I know my last and last have to be 5 and 1. 5 times 1 is 5, right? But now I need to make sure that my outer times my outer, 3 times 5, that's 15, plus my inner times my inner, 1 times 1, that's 1. That should equal my middle number here. Does 15 and 1, is that going to get me 8? There's no way I can get to 8. So let's try flipping this 1 and 5 around. And the more you do this, the quicker you'll be able to pick up on the patterns. But right, if I try 1 and 5, look what happens. What's 3 times 1? 3. What's 1 times 5? Can I use 3 and 5 to get to 8? Yes. So I know that's the order I want to do it. So I want my outers to be 3 and 1, and I want my inners to be 1 and 5. And I've got all pluses, so I just need to put 2 pluses in. Does that make it more confusing? So the reason why I do that is because, so for this one, it's easy because both of these numbers only have one factor pair. But sometimes you'll have multiple factors you have to test out. And that's when it's kind of nice to just have a process to think through, because you can kind of get lost. So let's look at part F. So again, I start by looking at my first number and my last number. So my first number is 5. What are the factors that get to 5? 5 and 1. And what are the factors that get to 18? 6 and 3. 9 and 2. 1 and 18. So now I have lots of options. However, in this one, they kind of give us a clue, don't they? Right? I know one of my last is going to be 3. So what does my other last number have to be? Has to be the 6, right? I can stick my 6 in there. Is it going to be a positive 6 or a negative 6? Yeah, negative, because I have to end up with a positive 18. So it's going to be negative 6. Negative 6. Okay, and then now I got to figure out if I'm going to do 1 and 5 or 5 and 1, right? Definitely going to have an X there. Now let's think about it. My outers and my inners, right? My outers plus my inners need to get to negative 21. So let's try one way. So if I put a 1 here and a 5 here, I've got 1 times negative 6. What's 1 times negative 6? Negative 6. And negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Does negative 6 and negative 15 give me negative 21? Yeah, it does. So then that's it. I'm done. Okay, so you don't have to use this. I'll kind of like do it a couple more times so you see what I'm talking about. But you can kind of just guess and check your way there. It's nice to have a process because it can save you time. I know it feels like a lot to do, but it can save you time. Let's do another one, G. So I look at my first number and my last number. My first number is 4. What are the factors of 4? 1 and 4, 2 and 2. And what are the factors of my last number of 11? Just 1 and 11, right? So I know my last and last have to be 1 and 11. Have to be. And I know that I also need to have like an X and an X. And I've got just 2 pluses here. So I'm going to have 2 pluses in here. All I got to figure out is what number goes in front of my X's. Okay, so which one do you want to try? 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? 2 and 2. Let's try 2 and 2. So I know, right, 2x times 2x. Do it the same way. 2x times 2x is going to give me 4x squared. I'm good. Now I check my outers and my inners. What's 2 times 11? 22. What's 1 times 2? 22 and 2. Does that give me 24? Yes, it does. Okay, and then my last and last, just triple checking, right? 1 times 11 gives me 11. So I know I'm right. Okay. Like I said, the more problems you do like this, the faster you'll pick up on the pattern and the quicker you'll be able to kind of do those little math problems in your head. But really, it's just a lot of guessing and checking. Okay, and if you know the format that you're trying to end up in, that's kind of easy to guess and check. Okay, so what's different about these problems than the ones we looked at yesterday? What's different about them? Look at the paper from yesterday and look at the paper from today. There's a paper from yesterday in the Tuesday folder. What's different about the problems from yesterday than compared to today? There's a middle number in yesterday's problems. And there was like the last number in yesterday's problems. What didn't yesterday's problems have? Huh? Yeah, the first number. The first number, right? Yesterday's problems all looked like x squared plus bx plus c. Today we're looking at ax squared plus bx plus c. So I have this number out in front of the x squared, which changes things a little bit, right? Because now we have to look at both the first number and the last number. Look at A and C, right? And we have to find a combination. Look at, should have said, look at factors. of A and C and find a combination to get to B. And then looking at this, right, I've got A, I've got B, and I've got C, right? A comes from my first times first. So R times P gives me A. And my last times last, S times Q would give me C, would give me that last number. And then it's the combination of the outers and the inners that give me B. So R times Q plus S times P. That's what gives me B. Let's look at the other side and we'll take a couple notes and then we can get practice in. Okay, so we're factoring quadratics. Of the form ax squared plus bx plus c when a is not 1. Right? Yesterday, a was always 1. It was always like an invisible 1. Today, a is not 1. Right? And again, right, I'm going to always have 2 binomials. I'm always going to have an x in each of my binomials. But then I have a number in front of the x and a number that I'm adding to the x. Right? And again, this is our intercept form. And this is the general form. Okay. And again, my first times first gives me the ax squared term. My last times last gives me the last term. And the combination of my outers and my inners give me this middle term. So we have to look for factors of A and C. And test which combinations give the correct C. Okay, and if there is a GCF, take it out first. Take out GCF first, if possible. Let me tell you, number 3 has a GCF. That'll make it a little easier to solve. Huh? Number 3? So I'm going to do just one more example with you. Okay, and I'm going to use this little cross method again, just to kind of show you how that makes sense to me. So if I have something like this, 18x squared minus 9x plus 20. I want to factor that into the product of 2 binomials, right? I've got my first my first, my last, my outers, my inners. I've got to fill in. I know my first terms have to have the x in it, but I got to figure out what numbers go here and what numbers go here. Should have been minus 20, not plus 20. Minus 20, minus 20. Okay, so if I look at my first term, 18x squared, I've got 1 times 18, bless you, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. If I look at my last term, I have 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. That's a lot of different combinations to try, right? So pretty much it's just guessing and checking from here. But do you see how like quickly it can get very confusing of like, okay, I can do 1 and 18, you know, just filling it in and trying to multiply all of them all the time. It's just a lot to think about all at once. So that's why I use this. So I've got my first up here, my last down here. My first times first needs to equal 18. My last times last needs to equal negative 20. And then my outers plus my inners is going to give me negative 9. And then I just kind of start filling it in from there. So let's try, give me one of these pairs, one of the pink pairs. Which pink pair should I try? 2 times 9. So I know 2 times 9 gives me 18, right? And then give me one of the green pairs. 4 times 5. So let's try it out. What's 2 times 4? Right? 2 times 4 is 8. 9 times 5 is 45. 45 and 8, is that going to give me to negative 9? No. What if I flip-flopped them around? What if I left my 2 and 9 there, but I switched those to 5 and 4 instead? I meant to do green. But 2 times 5, that's 10. 9 times 4, that's 36. Also not going to get me to negative 9, right? So I know I can't use 2 and 9 with 4 and 5, but I could use maybe 1 and 20. 1 and 20 get there? No, that's not going to get there. 40 and 9, and even the other way around, that's definitely not going to get there. 180 and 2, And then if I tried 2 and 10, 2 and 10, well, that's 90, and that's 4. That doesn't work. What about 10 and 2? 20 and 18? That's not going to work either. So that tells me if 2 and 9 didn't work with 4 and 5, it didn't work with 2 and 10, didn't work with 1 and 20, that means 2 and 9 is not my pair. That's not what I can't use that. So which pair should I try instead? Which pair can I try instead? What pink pair should I try? 1 and 18. If I try 1 and 18, 1 and 18, right? And I try 1 and 20, let's say. I'll do 20 and 1, right? 20 and 18, that doesn't get me to negative 9. And certainly 1 and 20, I don't know what 20 times 18, 360, I guess, right? Too much. That's not going to get me there. So that doesn't work. What about 2 and 10? I've got 180 and 2. That doesn't get me to negative 9, right? 10 and 2. Yeah, 36 and 10. Also not negative 9. Okay, so 2 and 10 didn't work. Or what did I just do? 1 and 20? 2 and 10. Both of those didn't work. What about 4 and 5? 18 times 5, that's going to be too big to go along with 4. And even the other way around, that doesn't work. Okay, so that tells me, right, 1 and 18 is not it either. So I only have one more option. 3 and 6. 3 and 6. So if I use 3 and 6, what green pair do you think I should use? 4 and 5? I've got 12 and I've got 30. That doesn't get me there. What about the other way around? 5 and 4. What's 3 times 5? And 6 times 4 is? Can I use 24 and 15 to get to -9? Yeah, you can. Then 24 needs to be negative, right? So that means that this 4 has to be negative. So then that tells me, right, I need 5 as my outer, -4 as my inner, and then 3 and 6. Okay. So let's see. So if you were following along for that whole thing, you probably didn't do any of the check your understanding questions. So just hold, how about you guys just hold on to the paper unless you finished all of them, all 4 of them. If you finished all 4, you can turn it in and I'll grade it. If you haven't finished all 4, try and work on them tonight. None of them are as confusing as this. I'm just kind of like, just set up. Did you get your, if once you got the greatest common factor out, it should have been easy. All right, and we have a practice day tomorrow. I'm gonna have you guys just do practice problems that I'll probably have you turn in for grade, okay?